The train whistle pierced the air as Katherine Zimmerman clutched her worn leather satchel, heart pounding with a mix of fear and desperate hope. This was her last chance, her final opportunity to escape the crushing poverty that had defined her entire 22 years of existence in Boston. The letter in her pocket promised a new life, a marriage to a man she never met. But as the dusty platform of Willow Creek, Colorado came into view in the summer of 1875, she wondered if she'd made the most terrible mistake of her life. "Last stop, Willow Creek!" the conductor bellowed, barely glancing at Katherine as she stepped down onto the platform, her simple blue dress and threadbare shawl standing out among the few well-dressed ladies disembarking ahead of her. Katherine stood alone, searching the faces on the platform for someone who might be waiting for her. The station master, a portly man with suspenders stretched tight across his belly, approached with a manifest in hand. "Name?" he asked gruffly. "Katherine Zimmerman," she replied, trying to keep her voice steady. "I'm here to meet Mr. Hargrove. Edgar Hargrove." The station master's expression changed instantly, his mouth twisting into something between pity and disdain. "Hargrove? Sorry to tell you, miss, but you're too late. He's already chosen another bride. Left a message saying you weren't what he was expecting after all." Katherine felt her knees weaken. "I don't understand. We had an arrangement. I paid for my passage with everything I had." "Well," the station master said, lowering his voice, "word is he received your photograph and decided you looked too common. Said he needed a wife with means, not another mouth to feed. Something about you being too poor for his station." The words struck Katherine like physical blows. She had sold everything, her mother's silver hairbrush, her father's pocket watch, even the small family Bible, to purchase her train ticket west. Now she stood stranded, without money, prospects, or a place to sleep. "Is there somewhere I might find work? A boarding house, perhaps?" she asked, fighting back tears. The station master shrugged. "Town's not exactly flush with opportunities for women, especially ones with no skills or money. Boarding house won't take you without a week's payment up front." As the platform cleared and the station master wandered back to his office, Katherine sank onto a bench, the reality of her situation crashing down upon her. Night would fall soon, and she had nowhere to go. "Excuse me, miss. You look like you might be in need of assistance." The voice was deep and warm, with a slight drawl that marked him as local. Katherine looked up to see a tall man standing before her, his broad shoulders silhouetted against the setting sun. He wore practical work clothes, denim trousers, a cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and a well-worn cowboy hat that he promptly removed as she met his gaze. "I'm Isaiah Walker," he said, his blue eyes kind beneath a shock of sun-bleached hair. "I couldn't help but overhear your predicament." Katherine quickly wiped away a tear. "I'm afraid I'm in quite a difficult situation, Mr. Walker. The man I was to marry has changed his mind." Isaiah's expression darkened. "Edgar Hargrove, I presume? Man's got a reputation for being particular about his investments." The way he said the word made it clear what he thought of treating marriage as a business transaction. "I have nowhere to go," Katherine admitted, hating the vulnerability in her voice. "And no means to return east." Isaiah shifted his weight, thinking for a moment. "My sister Martha runs the local cafe. She's always looking for help. It's not much, but it would give you a start until you figure things out. She's got a room above the cafe you could use." Katherine stared at him, suspicious of such generosity. "Why would you help a complete stranger?" His smile was genuine, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Because that's what neighbors do out here in the West, Mississippi. Zimmerman. Katherine Zimmerman. Well, Miss Zimmerman, you may have come here expecting to be a wife, but I reckon you might find something better: independence. That is, if you're willing to work hard." Katherine stood, gathering her dignity along with her small satchel. "Mr. Walker, hard work is something I'm quite familiar with." "I figured as much," he said with a nod. "Now, shall we get you settled before dark?" As they walked down the dusty main street of Willow Creek, Katherine felt the curious stares of townspeople. A woman alone was already an object of interest. A woman clearly abandoned by her intended husband was the subject of pity at best, scandal at worst. The cafe was a modest establishment with a hand-painted sign reading, "Martha's Home Cooking." Inside, the aroma of fresh bread and coffee filled the air, and a few late customers lingered over their meals. Martha Walker proved to be a sturdy woman in her early 30s with the same blue eyes as her brother, and a no-nonsense manner that Katherine immediately respected. "So you're stranded?" Martha said after Isaiah explained the situation. "Well, I can use the help, and the room upstairs is yours if you want it. Pay isn't much, but you'll get meals and a roof over your head." "That's more than generous," Katherine said, relief washing over her. "I'm a quick learner and not afraid of long hours." Martha nodded approvingly. "Good, because the work starts at dawn." "Isaiah, show her upstairs while I finish closing up." The room was small but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the main street. It was more privacy than Katherine had ever had in the crowded tenement where she'd grown up. "It's not much," Isaiah said, setting down her satchel. "It's perfect," Katherine replied, meaning it. "Thank you. I don't know how I'll ever repay your kindness." Isaiah shook his head. "No need for that. Just do good work for Martha, and find your place here if you can." After he left, Katherine sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. Through the window, she could see the mountains in the distance, purple against the fading light. She had come west for a husband but found herself alone. Yet somehow, in the kindness of strangers, she felt the first flicker of something she hadn't expected possibility. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Katherine rose before dawn to help Martha prepare for the breakfast crowd. She learned to make biscuits that melted in the mouth, to brew coffee strong enough to wake the dead, and to manage the steady stream of ranchers, shopkeepers, and travelers who made Martha's cafe the heart of Willow Creek. Isaiah came in most mornings before heading to his small ranch outside town. Katherine found herself looking forward to his visits, to the way he always tipped his hat to her, and asked how she was settling in. Unlike other men who sometimes let their eyes linger too long, Isaiah's gaze was respectful, his conversation genuine. One morning, about 2 weeks after her arrival, Edgar Hargrove himself came into the cafe with a woman on his arm, his new bride, Katherine presumed. She was elegantly dressed, with a complexion that had never seen hard work. Hargrove, a thin man with cold eyes, froze when he spotted Katherine serving tables. "Well," he said loudly enough for nearby tables to hear, "if it isn't the mail-order bride who couldn't afford to keep herself, let alone be a proper wife." The cafe fell silent. Katherine felt her cheeks burn but kept her chin up as she approached their table. "Good morning, Mr. Hargrove. What can I bring you and your wife today?" Her voice was steady, her expression composed. Hargrove looked surprised by her poise, then sneered. "Nothing from you. We'll wait for someone more suitable." Before Katherine could respond, Isaiah appeared beside her, his presence solid and reassuring. "Morning, Hargrove," he said, his tone deceptively casual. "I see you've met Miss Zimmerman, the newest addition to our community. Martha says she's the best help she's ever had, quick, intelligent, and with the kind of work ethic that would put most men to shame." Hargrove's mouth tightened. "Walker, I didn't realize you were acquainted with my rejected merchandise." Isaiah's eyes hardened, though his smile remained in place. "That's a strange way to refer to a lady, Hargrove. Where I come from, women aren't goods to be traded, and a man's worth isn't measured by the size of his wallet." "Is that so?" Hargrove scoffed. "Then perhaps you'd be interested in taking her off my hands. Though I must warn you, her dowry wouldn't buy a decent saddle." Isaiah looked at Katherine, his expression softening. "Miss Zimmerman may not come with a fortune, Hargrove, but she's rich enough for my heart. Some of us value character over coin." Katherine's breath caught in her throat at his words, even as she recognized them as a defense of her honor rather than a declaration of feeling. Hargrove stood abruptly, pulling his confused wife to her feet. "Keep your sanctimonious lectures, Walker. Some of us have standards to maintain." As they swept out of the cafe, Martha emerged from the kitchen, having heard the commotion. "Good riddance," she muttered. "Never liked that man's coffee order anyway. Too fussy by half." The incident became the talk of the town, with opinions divided between those who thought Katherine had been rightly rejected for her poverty, and those who admired her dignity in the face of humiliation. To Katherine's surprise, the majority seemed to fall into the latter camp. The West might be rough, but it respected resilience. That evening, as Katherine wiped down the last tables, Isaiah returned to the cafe. He removed his hat, turning it nervously in his hands. "I wanted to apologize for speaking out of turn this morning," he said. "I hope I didn't embarrass you further." Katherine smiled, touched by his concern. "You defended me when no one else would. There's no need for apologies." "Hargrove's a fool," Isaiah said, his jaw tightening. "Any man would be lucky to have a woman like you by his side." Their eyes met, and Katherine felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude. "Would you?" Isaiah hesitated, then plunged ahead. "Would you allow me to take you for a ride on Sunday? After church? I could show you some of the countryside. Might help you feel more at home here." "I'd like that very much," Katherine replied, surprised by how much she meant it. Sunday came, and after services at the small white church on the hill, Katherine found Isaiah waiting with a wagon and a picnic basket prepared by Martha. "My sister insisted," he explained with a sheepish grin. "Said I couldn't be trusted to provide a proper meal." They rode out beyond the town limits, the rolling foothills stretching before them, wildflowers dotting the prairie grass with splashes of yellow and purple. Isaiah pointed out landmarks: the creek that gave the town its name, the distant mountains where gold had once been found, the scattered ranches that made up the community. "And that's my place," he said, indicating a modest homestead with a small house, a barn, and a corral where several horses grazed. "Nothing fancy, but it's mine, free and clear." "It's beautiful," Katherine said sincerely. She had never owned anything, had never expected to. The idea of having land, a home that couldn't be taken away, it seemed like an impossible dream. They stopped by a stand of cottonwoods near the creek, spreading a blanket on the grass. As they ate Martha's fried chicken and apple pie, Isaiah told Katherine about his journey west after the war between the states, how he'd worked as a cowhand until he saved enough to buy his own land. "What about you?" he asked. "What brought you to answer an advertisement for a mail-order bride?" Katherine hesitated, then decided on honesty. "Desperation," she admitted. "After my parents died of influenza, I had no family, no prospects. I worked in a textile mill, but the hours were long, the pay meager, and the foreman persistent in his unwanted attentions." Isaiah's expression darkened at this, but he let her continue. "When I saw Mr. Hargrove's advertisement for a respectable woman of good character to be his wife, it seemed like Providence. He sent money for my passage after seeing my daguerreotype, but apparently changed his mind when he learned I had no dowry to speak of." "His loss," Isaiah said quietly. "Though I can't say I'm entirely sorry about how things turned out." Their eyes met, and Katherine felt that flutter again, stronger this time. Isaiah reached across the blanket, his hand covering hers. "Katherine, I know we haven't known each other long, but I want you to know that I admire you. Your courage, your determination. The way you've faced adversity with grace. You've been kinder to me than anyone in my life," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. The moment hung between them, fragile and full of possibility. Then Isaiah leaned forward and gently pressed his lips to hers, a kiss so tender it brought tears to her eyes. "I'm sorry," he said, pulling back. "I shouldn't have presumed." Katherine silenced him by returning the kiss, her heart pounding wildly. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I never expected this," she confessed. "I came west for security, not feelings." Isaiah smiled, brushing a strand of hair from her face. Life has a way of giving us what we need, not just what we think we want. As summer progressed into fall, Katherine flourished in Willow Creek. Her work at the cafe earned her the respect of the townspeople, and her friendship with Isaiah deepened into something more profound. They spent every Sunday together, and often Isaiah would stop by the cafe just to see her, bringing wildflowers or a book he thought she might enjoy. Martha watched their growing attachment with approval. "My brother's never looked at anyone the way he looks at you," she told Katherine one day as they prepared pies. "He's a good man. Stubborn as an old mule sometimes, but good to his core." "I know," Katherine replied, unable to keep the smile from her face. "I never thought I could feel this way about anyone." "He'll ask you to marry him before the first snow," Martha predicted. "Mark my words." But as October turned the aspen trees golden, an unexpected complication arose. A letter arrived for Katherine, forwarded from Boston. It was from a distant cousin who had been searching for her since her parents' deaths. The cousin explained that an uncle had died, leaving Katherine a modest inheritance, not a fortune, but enough to establish herself comfortably wherever she chose. "This changes everything," Katherine said to Isaiah as they sat on the porch of his ranch house that Sunday. "I'm not destitute anymore. I have choices I didn't have before." Isaiah's face was carefully neutral. "Will you return to Boston then?" The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken fears. Katherine took his hand. "Isaiah, when I came west, I thought marriage was my only path to security. Now I find I have means of my own, and yet—" "And yet?" he prompted when she hesitated. "And yet the thought of leaving Willow Creek, of leaving you, breaks my heart." Tears filled her eyes. "I've found something here I never expected. Something money can't buy." Isaiah gathered her into his arms. "Katherine, I was planning to wait until Christmas to ask, but I can't bear the thought of you leaving. Will you marry me? Not because you need security, but because we've found love." "Yes," she whispered against his chest. "1,000 times yes." They were married in the small church just as the first snow began to fall, Martha standing as witness along with half the town. Katherine wore a new dress of deep blue wool, and Isaiah had a suit that made him look uncomfortable but handsome. The inheritance became their nest egg, allowing them to expand the ranch and make improvements to the house. As they drove back to the ranch after the ceremony, snowflakes catching in Katherine's hair, Isaiah pulled the wagon to a stop and turned to his bride. "Do you remember what I said that day in the cafe? When Hargrove was being so cruel?" Katherine smiled. "You said I was rich enough for your heart." "I meant it then, though I barely knew you," he said, taking her gloved hands in his. "But now I know it's true in ways I couldn't have imagined. You've made me the wealthiest man in Colorado, Katherine Walker." "And how is that?" she asked, though she already knew the answer. "Because I have your love," he replied, drawing her close. "And that's worth more than all the gold in these mountains." Their life together unfolded with the seasons. The ranch prospered under their joint care, with Katherine proving as adept at keeping books and planning improvements as Isaiah was at managing the livestock. They converted the old bunkhouse into a schoolhouse, with Katherine teaching the children from nearby homesteads. Her inheritance allowed them to weather the lean years when drought or harsh winters threatened their livelihood. 2 years after their wedding, their daughter Elizabeth was born, followed by twin boys, Joseph and James, 18 months later. The house that had once seemed so empty to Isaiah now echoed with laughter and the patter of small feet. On their 5th wedding anniversary, Isaiah presented Katherine with a journal bound in soft leather. "What's this for?" she asked, running her fingers over the blank pages. "I thought you might want to write our story," he said. "How a mail-order bride who was told she was too poor found a cowboy who thought she was rich beyond measure." Katherine smiled, remembering the frightened young woman who had stepped off the train that summer day, alone and uncertain. "It's a good story," she agreed. "One worth telling." That night, after the children were asleep, Katherine began to write. "I came west seeking security but found love instead. I arrived with nothing but a satchel and desperate hope, only to be rejected for my poverty. But then I met a man who saw wealth where others saw want, who valued character over coin, who believed I was rich enough for his heart. As the years passed, their family grew, as did their prosperity. The Walker Ranch became known throughout the county for its fine horses and hospitable owners. Katherine's little schoolhouse expanded into a proper town school, where she taught until her own children were grown. Edgar Hargrove's banking venture eventually failed, and he left town in disgrace, his society wife returning east to her family. Sometimes Katherine thought about how different her life would have been had he not rejected her that day, and she said a silent prayer of gratitude for unanswered prayers. On their 25th wedding anniversary, surrounded by their children, grandchildren, and the friends who had become family, Isaiah raised a toast to his wife. "To Katherine," he said, his voice still strong though his hair had silvered, "who taught me that true wealth isn't measured in dollars but in love, courage, and character. Who made a simple cowboy the richest man in the West." Katherine looked around at the life they had built together, at the faces of their children, at the home filled with memories, at the man who had seen value in her when she couldn't see it herself, and knew that she, too, had found riches beyond measure in the Wild West. "And to Isaiah," she added, raising her own glass, her eyes meeting his across the table, "who saw what I could be before I knew it myself. Who gave me not just a home, but a place to belong." Later that night, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold, Isaiah took her hand, his touch as familiar and dear as her own heartbeat. "Any regrets?" he asked, a question he'd posed every anniversary since their first. And as she had every year, Katherine shook her head and answered with the truth that had shaped her life. "Not one. Every step, every struggle led me here, to you. And that makes it all worthwhile." In the distance, a train whistle sounded, the same sound that had heralded her arrival in Willow Creek all those years ago. But now, instead of fear, it filled her with gratitude for the journey that had brought her home.